Story, The Fury of Shuri. Who could this be? Ororo thought as she opened a strange message that appeared on her kimoyo, and it read, "Dear Ororo, we believe that you can do it. Nevertheless, we have our fingers crossed." Rockslide even suggested the cuckoos manipulate the minds of some of the world leaders to vote yes, but the girl said that Psi shields are present at the UN headquarters. "Still, we will be watching you and T'Challa for the entire day. Bye for now. Armor." Ororo smiled as she sent a text message reply through the kimoyo to the teenage Japanese girl. "Thanks. But keep an eye out at the base. You never know who might show up. Also, the older X-Men may need backup against the anti-mutant extremists, so remain sharp." Ororo heard the flipping of pages that came from T'Challa, who was seated on her left. She turned towards him. "By the look of this agenda, Shuri should be in place by the time you start your speech," said T'Challa, and then he passed the document to Ororo. "It's really great that she has sacrificed her time to help us," remarked Ororo as she took the document and then perused it. "The nations will negotiate the mutant policy directly afterwards. That's good. My speech would be fresh in their minds," said Ororo. A blue flash caught her eye, consequently, she glanced to the left window. A motorcycle outrider had moved ahead of the car. "The General Secretary might think he appeases us by sending UN security to escort us from the airport," remarked T'Challa. "And what is foolish about this arrangement is that we are still dangerous even without the powers," commented Ororo. She looked at the spot on her arm where the UNB-24 nullifier was injected. She crossed her slender legs, the right going over the left, and her right open-toe shoe brushed up against T'Challa. She then dropped the agenda onto the dashboard middle tray and rested her left hand on T'Challa's thigh. He then placed his muscular arm around her shoulders. Their car drove itself onto 43 RD Street, Turtle Bay, New York. The destination was 760 United Nations Plaza. The United Nations Secretariat building and then the sloping General Assembly building appeared over the townhouses and consulates of the quiet Turtle Bay community. T'Challa brushed his right eyebrow with his thumb, and he said, "Umba still has not said anything about his breakup with Enzi. Like I said, give him time. But I will talk with Enzi if she is willing to say what happened." "Good idea." The Outriders contacted T'Challa and Ororo and informed the couple of their arrival at the eastern side of the United Nations Plaza. "Okay," said Ororo to the head of the Outriders, who spoke on a radio link. As she did that, a line of black Mercedes-Benzes crossed the intersection that T'Challa and her neared. Ororo knew the occupants were other world leaders headed for the plaza. A few of the leaders were staying at their consulates in the neighborhood. The sight of the vehicles prompted Ororo to think about the upcoming hours, as she leaned her head back on T'Challa's arm. "T'Challa and I must try to convince the UN member nations to accept the mutant policy when most of them are afraid of us, but I hope good sense will prevail to curb that issue. And then there is this Kine fellow," thought Ororo. Kine was the president of MOTAB and the head of the OR bloc of countries. Kine was stubbornly against the mutant policy, and he tried to influence other countries to vote no when he made a world tour prior to the General Assembly. "Kine will have to be dealt with," said Ororo. "He really got a lot of the countries doubting the policy," said T'Challa. "So this will be our strategy. We will ensure the other countries not influenced by him are 100% behind us first. Afterwards we will talk with him and the others to hear their concerns and complaints about the policy. Then see how it goes from there." The car halted in the underground driveway of the General Assembly building. Then T'Challa and Ororo kissed deeply, both holding lightly the sides of the other's face. The car doors raised up silently and the couple alighted from the sleek black vehicle. Afterwards the car doors lowered. Ororo saw the Secretary General and the head of the UN Security Division. Both men were the same height as Ororo, 5'11", and they wore business suits. The general secretary was thinner than the otherwise beefy head of security. The two men approached T'Challa and Ororo. General civility followed and then the customary handshakes. "You will give the speech after my opening remarks," said the Secretary General. "Thank you," said Ororo. "In the meantime, Mr. T'Challa can take up Wakanda's seating position before the vote process starts," said the Secretary General while he looked at the 6-foot man he spoke about. "All right," said T'Challa. From there on, the group entered an elevator that took them to the General Assembly Hall. Then the elevator opened to a corridor that overlooked the Secretariat Plaza. T'Challa and Ororo embraced slightly. "Go get them," T'Challa whispered in her ear. "I will," whispered Ororo. She moved off with the Secretary General while T'Challa entered the main area of the Assembly Hall. Instantly he felt as all the eyes in the place settled on him. Nevertheless he walked simply up to the third-step platform of the gold, blue, and green hall. Eventually he arrived at Wakanda's seating arrangement and he settled down at the table. He shook the hands of the leaders at the tables next to Wakanda's. Most of the seating arrangements were based on alphabetical order. Then he surveyed the 189 world leaders in the hall. T'Challa noticed Kine as the man spoke with 5 other leaders. Suddenly Kine looked up at him and the two exchanged hand signals that said hello. Then Kine continued his conversations. "What poison are you telling them?" muttered T'Challa. Soon he became tired of the constant chatter that came from the leaders and their associates. He took out his kimoyo and he laid it near the color-coded voting buttons. The green button was for yes, the red was for no and the yellow for abstain. He opened the folder on the kimoyo screen that contained Ororo's speech. Then he looked at it once again. "It's a great speech," thought T'Challa. Then he thought about Ororo's journey from Africa to fighting for mutant human peace to this point. "And there is so much more for her to do," thought T'Challa. After 10 minutes, all the member nations were seated, and the Secretary General stood at the podium. Ororo was seated nearby. T'Challa glanced behind him at the World Media Gallery where all the attention was focused on the speaker at the podium. Everyone in the world had their eyes on the General Assembly, because mutant issues mattered to all humans. The mutant policy resolution, if accepted, would have to be enshrined in the constitutions of all member nations as part of the Rights to Life laws. Therefore the policy would steer mutant issues in all the countries. The Secretary General's opening address lasted for 45 minutes and then it was Ororo's turn at the podium. She had the speech memorized, therefore, she went to the podium without any documents. Ororo's white hair and blue eyes showed that she was a mutant. She had a confident demeanor that was amplified by her attire. She adjusted the microphone slightly and then she released her oratory skills. All the while she maintained constant eye contact with her audience. She quickly passed through the introduction and got down to the gist of things. Thus she said, "For years mutants have been vilified, ostracized, and hunted down without protection from the law as they were not viewed as human. Despite the fact that all scientific evidence proves that mutants are humans. The X gene has thus been considered a curse to some mutants, because of the negative treatment. But right now we can change that thinking by accepting this binding resolution on mutant policy. This policy will protect mutants with an active X gene, DEPA mutants, and unborn mutants. In the case of unborn babies detected with the X gene, they will be guaranteed by law to be given up for adoption if the parents do not want the responsibility of caring for such a child, instead of the cruel and inhumane practices that exist in various parts of the world. In regards to DEPA mutants, the policy will mean that they will not be blacklisted, secretly monitored, and secretly followed because of fear that their powers may return. For the mutants with the active X gene, the policy will protect them from discrimination, experimentation, exploitation, and attacks. Mutants are humans, therefore, they must be given the same basic human rights. Notwithstanding, mutants must also be responsible for their actions. Also, they must treat their fellow man with respect and tolerance. As I see it, humans with mutations and humans without the X gene must be equally responsible for each other in a neighborly way. Since we are all neighbors, we may have different physical appearances, have affinity to different groups, and have different philosophies on life. But at the end of the day, we are the people of Earth. Ororo had to pause, because an applause came from the assembly. She noticed T'Challa was also clapping. Then she continued the speech. At times we must overcome our specific view of things and see the larger responsibility. Chapter We must overcome our specific view of things and see the larger responsibility, were the final words that Shuri heard before she switched off the car's radio. She had driven the blue sedan through Manhattan to the outskirts of Turtle Bay. An hour before, she came ashore secretly from a mini-submersible. The car had been left by Wakanda's Secret Service in New York, and in the back seat were 2 commando suits along with weapons. The attractive Shuri had disguised herself with a basketball cap that covered her medium haircut and dark shades that hid her deep brown eyes. See the larger responsibility, thought Shuri as she remembered Ororo's words. Didn't my father used to say that, muttered Shuri. Then she tossed the city map from her lap into the passenger seat. Concurrently, she drove into the alley specified by the Secret Service. She parked in the precise spot as indicated on the map. Then she slipped her curvy body into the back seat and changed into the white vibranium weave Panther suit. Lastly, she slung the sonic wave cannon over her right shoulder. Shuri continued thinking about her mission to safeguard the world leaders and not necessarily T'Challa and Ororo, and the likelihood of an attack on the General Assembly. That's the difference between T'Challa and me. He has selflessly fought for people other than Wakandans, while my focus has squarely been on the citizens of our nation, pondered Shuri. The young woman opened the hatch below her and she came across a manhole cover. She used a mini laser from her belt to cut the cover. Then she kicked the cutout down and it made a heavy clang noise when it landed in the sewer. Meanwhile, the soul searching continued in her head. So I'm to protect these people that don't know me and who I don't know about, thought Shuri. She lowered herself into the lightless tunnel, and she turned on the mask's infrared optics. Afterwards, she strapped a mini-map computer on her left forearm. It is easy for T'Challa to care about these people, because he spent so much time outside Wakanda with them, Shuri said in her mind. She silently navigated the tunnel networks as she headed towards Turtle Bay, all the while leaving markers to direct her back to the car's position. The plan was for her to stay holed up for the 2 days and remain radio silent to avoid detection. Hopefully the General Assembly would run without a disturbance, and she would return to Wakanda in the mini-submersible. Then I could get a hot shower, Shuri thought. After almost an hour of steady progress by Shuri, the silence in the tunnels was shattered by a noise. It was a man complaining some 20 yards to Shuri's left. She came to a dead stop, and her eyes peered into the direction, but she saw no one. Was that a maintenance worker, or did the UN place agents down here also? Shuri wondered. She had to be sure. Thus Shuri turned off the map computer and activated the combat suit's invisibility mode. She then maneuvered carefully along a narrow tunnel towards the sound's origin. Chapter Shuri came upon a damp and mossy wall at the end of the tunnel. Naturally, she turned around to check behind her. Did I really hear correctly? She pondered. Then she heard accented voices behind the wall. Don't tell me to be quiet. That thing bit me. Didn't you see the size of that sewer rat? Said someone with a scruffy voice. Stop up, you fool. Someone might hear us. I don't know why I'm paired up with an imbecile like you, commented a raspy voice. As a result of the voices, Shuri placed her head closer to the wall to hear more clearly. Who are they? She asked herself. Moreover, the voices seemed to come from full-grown men. Hold up, said the scruffy voice. What now? Did the rat come back to frighten you? Asked the raspy voice. No, I smell something odd, replied the scruffy voice. This is a sewer, not something. Someone. Right there. Shuri heard the click of a weapon drawn, so she pushed off the wall in a heartbeat. As a result, she fell hard onto her back. A moment later, a bullet pierced the concrete wall like it was paper. A silencer had softened the assault rifle's rapport to a thwoot. Did you get it? Asked the raspy voice. I don't think so. Wait. I hear a heartbeat, replied the scruffy voice in a measured manner. A human's by the sound of it. Meanwhile, Shuri clenched her teeth in anger as she aimed the sonic wave cannon at the wall. My turn, she thought. Then she squeezed the trigger, but the cannon remained dormant. Suddenly the suit's invisibility mode was deactivated and the infrared optics died. My electro-pulse will prevent whoever it is from contacting anyone, said the raspy voice in a collected way. I will go this way and you take the turn. We'll box him in. All right, said the scruffy voice. They are coming for me, thought Shuri. She understood that an electromagnetic pulse had shut down all her electronic weapons. But she still had the survival knife in her belt, hence, she took it out with her right hand. She stood and listened attentively to her surroundings. Faint echoes of movement on rusty metal came to her. I have to take out the hyper-sensed one first, since he can track me, she thought. Shuri dropped low with the knife in front of her, and she used the blind fighter skills she learned from the Black Panther training to move soundlessly in the darkness. Eventually she exited the tunnel that led to the wall. As expected, she heard the quick footsteps of someone as he came from the tunnel on her left. Shuri steadied herself. Gotcha, said the scruffy man. A flash and a thwoot came from the rifle. Shuri anticipated the man's line of fire, and she dropped sharply to her right. In quick succession, Shuri moved to the left then to the right of the tunnel until she was up to the man in 3 seconds. She thrust the knife into the man's torso, and she turned the weapon clockwise in the wound. The blade was laced with a fast-acting poison. The man held onto Shuri's right shoulder while the rifle fired twice aimlessly into the ground. Then she felt the dead weight of the man bearing down on her. A new sensation traveled to Shuri's brain. She had been shot in the arm. Or was it a flesh wound? She was not certain. But she was now aware that the bullets could penetrate her body armor. Adamantium-tipped bullets, she thought. Shuri knew that adamantium metal was made in an attempt to replicate the high-grade vibranium metal found only in Wakanda. More so, only the well-connected had access to adamantium. But Shuri did not contemplate too long on the issue. She withdrew the knife and then allowed the man to slump on the side. The next one was not far away. Shuri sheathed the knife. Thereafter, she checked the slain man's face for his infrared optics. Then she pulled back her mask and slipped on the infrared optics. The man was coming closer. Shuri calmly confiscated the rifle and then she dropped onto her left knee while she bent the right knee for balance. She aimed the rifle at the area she judged the man would appear from. 5 seconds later, the man entered Shuri's crosshairs, and she shot him in the legs and shoulders. He cried out briefly as he fell to the left side. Now to get answers, thought Shuri. She carefully came upon the man. He had a round face and a medium-built body. He breathed heavily as the pain sank into his body. Without pity, Shuri placed the hot tip of the silencer onto the man's left shoulder wound. The man gave a brief and low cry of pain. Shuri was satisfied that he got the message. Your loudmouth friend is gone. You're alone. Tell me who you are and why you are down here, else I'll leave you with the rats. Shuri said. What makes you think I'm alone? Asked the man. Shuri heard heavy running in the tunnels. The reinforcements were coming from various directions. Then she looked at the man's chest plate, and she saw that a small communicator was attached. It was turned on. In a quick action, Shuri dropped her right boot heel into the man's face, and it stunned him. Then she seized his rifle and a few magazines. I have to draw attention to these people, thought Shuri. She unscrewed the silencers from the rifles. The enemies had converged on her location, and she spotted 2 behind her and 2 in front. Consequently, Shuri dropped onto her stomach as the men shot at her with muzzled automatic rifles. Shuri crossed her rifles, so one pointed behind her and the other faced forward. Then she fired the automatic rifles. The reports sent loud echoes in the tunnel network. Then Shuri chose to attack the men in front of her. She continued firing both weapons as the men took cover. She used the momentary lull in enemy fire to sprint to her targets. The 2 men realized Shuri's ploy at the last minute, but she took them out before they reacted. However, more combatants were to the back of her, and she heard the approach of about 8 on her right flank. Then suddenly she felt the fresh bullet wounds. Nonetheless, she swallowed the pain and concentrated. She studied the figures at her feet and she saw their grenades. Subsequently, she attached the explosives to the side of the tunnel, and then she pulled the triggers. Quickly afterwards she covered her ears, moved away, and then dropped on her knees. The grenades tore a hole in the tunnel moments later. Thus Shuri rose sharply, and she dived through the opening as the enemies resumed shooting. I have to get to the surface and warn them, thought Shuri as she got up and ran along the new tunnel to gain some distance between her and the shooters. Moments afterwards, Grozny, the leader of the squad, lost sight of Shuri. Then he signaled with a closed right fist for the shooting to end. The leader's face was clean-shaved, his eyes were black, and his hair was brown. Who was that? Asked the second in command. It does not matter, replied the Grozny with an accent. What do you mean? Inquired the second in command. All that noise. Someone was sure to hear us. The mission is compromised. Yes, this mission is compromised. But if we can't terminate Kine at the consulate, then we will ambush him at the airport, said Grozny, although he knew the open ambush would reduce his group's chances of escape. Let's move out. Subsequently, the 30 combatants exited the area and they took their fallen with them. Chapter T'Challa and Ororo accidentally met Kine on the way to the first conference room. He was 6 feet 3 inches tall, with graying hair, broad face, and surprisingly cordial. Nice speech, said Kine in a heavy accented voice while he extended his hand to Ororo. Thank you, said Ororo as she received the firm handshake. But there are a few issues that I disagree with, Kine said bluntly. Like what? Inquired Ororo, although she had read up on Kine's treatment of mutants in his country. Like not allowing parents to give the antidote to their children with the X gene, said Kine in a frank manner. Ororo understood that he wanted to test her before their scheduled meeting. Therefore she kept herself in check. The X gene is not a disease, said Ororo. I know. It is an accident of nature, said Kine with a slight grin. Or was it the work of space gods seeking a new species that would one day supersede ordinary humans? So you think mutants are a conspiracy? Asked T'Challa, even though he knew about the Celestials or space gods as they were called. There is a book called The Space Gods and Mutants Connection by Alwyn Richards. It's about great alien beings coming to Earth and doing experiments on humans, replied Kine. I find it very insightful. You would. But if you will excuse us, we have a meeting to attend. Later on today you will have our undivided attention, said Ororo. Thereafter T'Challa and Ororo left Kine at the doorway. He rubbed his chin to symbolize where he had taken the brush off. Once the couple was inside the room, they began to speak softly with each other. No one wonder he drummed up so much support, if he went around saying mutants were out to replace humans from the start, said Ororo. Yet he revealed a lot about himself which works in our favor, said T'Challa. Like his arrogance and ignorance. Eventually T'Challa and Ororo met with First Nations grouping. Meanwhile Shuri began treating her injuries after realizing that no one was pursuing her. She had multiple bullet grazes, but 2 had passed through her right side. Luckily they had missed the vital organs. However, the exit wounds were affecting the surrounding tissues. She injected the affected areas with a sterilizer, and she applied a healing agent on the wounds. The healing agent caused a sharp pain to travel throughout her nervous system. She bit down hard to prevent a scream from escaping her lips. As she winced and grimaced, the pain continued for 7 minutes until it stopped. Then she bandaged the wounds. She checked her equipment and they were still inactive. Damn it, said Shuri, and then she remembered first 2 combatants' abilities. Were they mutants? She asked herself. And why aren't they following me? Furthermore, where are the UN agents? They should be swarming down here by now. What are they, deaf? She asked aloud. Then she studied the make of the rifles and one of the adamantium bullets. She was certain that a trace could be made by Wakanda's Secret Service. Shuri packed up her gear and she returned to the scene of the fight. She noticed the bodies were gone and the tunnels were silent again. She found the last marker that she had left on the wall. Thereafter she followed the rest of the markers back to the car. The journey took 30 minutes, and she was practically alone except for the occasional sewer rat. Eventually Shuri made it to the car, and she climbed inside it. Then she quickly returned to civilian attire. She used the car's cellular phone to send a text message code to Wakanda's Secret Service. In the code, she had requested a pickup point for the confiscated weapons. Then she sent another coded message that indicated that a possible threat was detected. Afterwards she dropped the phone in the passenger seat, and she waited for a response. 5 minutes later a Wakanda Secret Service car arrived at her location and it reversed into the alley. Then the spy android alighted. It appeared to be a late 20s man, with a strong build and 6-foot height. I'm here for the items, said the android when it came to the window. Shuri handed the rifles and the magazines to the android. Then the robot returned to its car and it drove off. A minute later the mobile phone received a new coded text message. It informed Shuri that the ballistic check may take hours. Time we don't have, thought Shuri. T'Challa checked the coded message received on his Kimoyo, then he looked at Ororo who had also answered her Kimoyo. Both realized that the Secretary General had to be told about the possible threat. Therefore the couple asked for a break at the meeting they were attending and it was given. Afterwards the pair searched for the Secretary General and they found him in the conference building. What is it? He asked politely. We have cause to believe that there is a security risk. You should send agents to the tunnels at Beekman and Condren streets, responded T'Challa. The Secretary General's visage expressed his concern. How do you know this? He asked. Our resources have informed us of the issue, replied Ororo. The Secretary General focused on her. The vote will continue as planned if the threat is taken care of in a timely fashion. However, I will have to postpone the proceedings if it comes to a point that the leaders' lives are at a severe risk, said the Secretary General. "We understand," said Ororo. Subsequently the Secretary-General departed. Then T'Challa peered out the nearby window at the East River waterfront. Moreover, the sky outside was overcast. "Then it's up to Shuri to end this threat quickly," said T'Challa. Ororo joined him, and she folded her arms. "She can do it," said Ororo. "But I wonder who these people are. Extremists in my opinion. I was looking forward to an uninterrupted vote. But if it has to be postponed, I have no problem starting over," said Ororo. Then T'Challa hugged her. "Neither do I," he said. Ororo rested her head on T'Challa's right shoulder, and she held onto him. She relaxed for a moment. Then the pair sensed that time was already lost on the suspected threat, so they gradually released each other. However, they kissed. "We have to get back to the meeting and keep on schedule," said Ororo. Subsequently the couple returned to the General Assembly building. Chapter Shuri waited 4 hours for the Secret Service's information. Therefore she studied the map of New York to pass the time. She noted the Baxter Building and Avengers Tower, because T'Challa had worked with other heroes from those places to save the world. Then she noticed Westchester, where Ororo was trained to control her mutant abilities, so she could protect the same humans that hated her kind. "And now my brother and sister-in-law are using Wakanda's resources to help a world that is suspicious of the country," said Shuri. "So why does T'Challa and Ororo continue with it?" She contemplated on the question for a while. "It's just their way of life," Shuri said finally. Then she exited the car, and she walked slowly around it to stretch her legs. Meanwhile she looked at the windowless buildings and lonely street that were alien to her. "I like Wakanda better," she said. Then she sat on the side of the trunk and folded her arms. "Most likely I will have to do more of these odd missions to help non-Wakandans in the future. Who knows, it may eventually become a way of life for me too," thought Shuri. Subsequently she entered the car. At the same time, the Secret Service sent the location of the buyers of the adamantium bullets. "Great," said Shuri. The bullets were purchased by PK Incorporated, situated at 898 Rush Street in New York. Consequently Shuri checked the map and then she headed for site. Chapter An hour later, Shuri drove past PK Incorporated. She glanced at the blue 4-story building. Also she did not see any guards. Therefore Shuri went around the block, and she parked the car behind the business. She kept on the disguise and alighted. Thereafter she ensured that no one watched her activities. Then she fired a rope hook at the top of the wall. Soon after she nimbly climbed the wall. The back of the building was like a scrap yard, and Shuri studied the scene for human presence. There was none, therefore, she leapt off and landed with ease. In a cautious manner, she went to the back door. It was locked. Therefore Shuri took an acid spray from her combat belt and applied it on the lock. The impediment melted, then she entered the building. Inside was unlit and quiet. Also the rooms on the first floor were totally empty. It did not seem like anyone had used the building recently. Nonetheless Shuri remained cautious. Meanwhile, she moved up to the second and third floors. Eventually she arrived at an opened office. A large national flag on the wall was the first item that struck Shuri as she entered the office. Therefore she took a picture of the flag with her kimoyo. Then she examined the drawers in the office desk. She found only a scrap of yellow paper with a telephone number. The area code was for New York. "Let's see who is on the other end," said Shuri. Thus she dialed the number on her mobile phone, and a recording answered. "You have reached the offices of the Motab Political Refugees Organization. Press 1 if you know." Shuri ended the call. She was not familiar with the Motab group, but it could be checked out by the Secret Service. Afterwards Shuri left the building. Chapter Kine had his hands clasped on the conference table as T'Challa and Ororo entered the room. On his flanks were the other nations that were not for the mutant policy. Then he separated his hands and he adjusted the table sign that read Motab in front of him. Ororo looked at Kine as she took her seat opposite him, and the former industrialist kept a blank expression. T'Challa and Ororo politely greeted the leaders and it was reciprocated. The couple had decided to split their efforts. Ororo would negotiate with the other nations while T'Challa would rebuttal Kine. 45 minutes later, several of the nations started to defect to T'Challa's and Ororo's side. Then the couple received the alert that Kine might be the target of the combatants. Despite Ororo's opinion that the man was very misinformed about mutants, she still had to warn him about the danger. "Mr. Kine, Wakanda's security services believe that your life may be in danger from a group called the Motab Political Refugees Organization," said Ororo. She looked directly into his eyes. "Is this a joke?" asked Kine as he removed his reading glasses. "No," said Ororo. "I advise you speak with the Secretary General." Then she stood to show the urgency of the matter. Kine also stood. He looked at the other leaders. "Please excuse me," he said. "Yes, please excuse us," said T'Challa as he rose. The leaders stated that they understood the seriousness of the development. Subsequently T'Challa and Ororo accompanied Kine out of the conference room. Eventually they contacted the Secretary General and the UN head of security was brought into the matter. However, a member of the Motab dissident group worked in the security division, and he sent a message Grozny. "Perfect," said Grozny with a grin, "because Kine may be on his way to the small airport, sooner than later, in an attempt to flee the suspected danger." Then Grozny looked at his colleagues as they prepared for the ambush. He and his comrades were given their powers by the underworld geneticist Nakia Exon. Moreover, the group were exacting revenge on Kine for chasing out their parents from Motab when he first assumed power. "Everyone on standby," said Grozny. Meanwhile, in a corridor at the Secretariat building, Kine expressed what he thought about the political refugees. "They are terrorists. They didn't like my reforms, so they tried to incite violence. Then they fled to the US, he said. And if the information is correct, then they have the firepower to take out my security. So I'm leaving for Motab immediately." "Now hold on," said the Secretary General. "The US officers can take care of the group." "I don't want to hear it," said Kine as he raised his left hand. Subsequently he shook the Secretary General's hand, followed by T'Challa's and Ororo's. Then Kine departed hurriedly. "I'll still contact the US security agencies," said the Secretary General. Then he and the head of security left the scene. Ororo inhaled deeply, because Kine was still in danger. "Shuri should ensure he leaves the country safely," she said. "I'll send word," said T'Challa as he contacted Wakanda over the Kimoyo. Chapter Shuri was given Kine's route to the airport, hence, she headed quickly to protect him. Several minutes later, one of Grozny's combatants, who pretended to fix a stalled car at the side of the street in the vicinity of the airport, indicated over a short band radio that Kine had just passed him. Subsequently the combatant got into his car, and he followed the presidential vehicles. Then the combatant pointed his left hand at the car in front of him. Subsequently he emitted a short-range electromagnetic pulse from the hand. Consequently the car lost power and it decelerated. Satisfied, the combatant armed himself with an assault rifle, then he pointed at the stranded car and he began shooting indiscriminately into the vehicle. Further down the street, a truck stopped across the street and it blocked the path to the airport. And the first presidential car smashed into the truck. Grozny and his comrades exited from the truck. Then electromagnetic pulses were released at the 6 presidential cars. Suddenly Grozny's hyper-hearing picked up a roaring car engine at the top of the street. Chapter Shuri held the steering wheel with one hand while her free hand removed the cap and sunglasses. Then she made a sharp turn at the top of the street, and she spotted the combatant's car as it shot at the stranded security car. Therefore she aimed the sonic wave cannon, outside her window, towards the enemy's vehicle. Subsequently she fired the slender weapon at the combatant's grey car. The sound wave raised the car as though a giant kicked it. The car's trunk dented in and the hubcaps fell off. Then the car flipped over. Then Shuri punched her car's accelerator as she headed to the end of the street. The information stated that Kine was in the 3rd presidential car, hence, she went as close as possible to it. Meanwhile she fired at the few combatants that she saw. And the men were punched off their feet by the cannon's force. Then Shuri came to a screeching halt at Kine's car. She ducked below the dashboard to avoid the expected rifle fire. Then she opened the door, and she crawled out of the car. Soon after, the combatants shot at the sedan. Then Shuri realized that her sonic wave cannon was depot word. But I can still use it, she thought as she slung the cannon over her left shoulder. Then Shuri opened Kine's car door. A bodyguard shot at her, but she avoided it by moving swiftly to her left. Then she pulled his gun arm and shot her right hand into the man's throat. Subsequently the man lost consciousness. Then Shuri pulled him out roughly. Afterwards she saw a fearful Kine. "I'm here to rescue you," said Shuri. "What? Who are you?" asked Kine. "Keep your head down and do as I say." Then Shuri forced Kine to lean forward until his forehead and knees made contact. She glanced at the driver, and he was slumped over the steering wheel. Then she heard the combatants nearing the car. They were also preoccupied briefly with the security personnel from the other cars. Good, thought Shuri. She seized the bodyguard's handgun as she pushed him out further, and she towed a compliant Kine. Once outside, Shuri fired into the car's engine. Her target was the fuselage. Subsequently the engine exploded in a fireball. The sudden heat pushed back the combatants. Meanwhile Shuri relieved the bodyguard of the gun on his right ankle, and she gave instructions to Kine. "Stay down and don't move," said Shuri. Then Shuri somersaulted onto the car's roof. Instantly she pinpointed her targets. 10 of them. Afterwards she somersaulted. Simultaneously, she shot both handguns at the men with a sniper's accuracy. She deliberately landed on her left side and kept on firing. Then she watched as all the targets fell. Also Shuri had used up all the bullets in the handguns. But she did not linger on the ground. She acrobatically spun her body up and then she landed on her feet. Instantly the woman dropped the guns, and she held the cannon. 10 combatants remained, moreover, they all aimed at Shuri. But she slackened her body, concentrated on her senses and then she sprinted forward. Grozny believed she was crazy as he shot at her and his comrades followed. But Shuri was not crazy, in spite of her kamikaze-like tactic. She had a plan. The sonic wave cannon was made of refined vibranium, thus it was stronger than the type woven into her combat suit. Moreover, the cylinder shape of the cannon meant projectiles could be deflected off of it. Therefore a confident Shuri leapt into the air towards the shooters, and she gave a furious war cry. She instinctively deflected the oncoming bullets with quick revolutions of the cannon, resulting in the bullets being redirected back at the combatants. Grozny was astonished as he saw his comrades fall dead. Eventually, he was the last one left. Shuri landed low on her feet and then she took out her knife. Then she threw the knife at Grozny's forehead as she rose sharply. The blade struck its mark, and Grozny slumped to the right. Afterwards, Shuri surveyed the vicinity to ensure that all the attackers were terminated. They were. As a result, she went to check on Kine. He was trembling when Shuri came by him, but he was physically all right. Then Shuri heard police car sirens. "I can't stay here," she mumbled. Then she glanced at the truck and it was a means of escape. Consequently, she gathered the commando gear from the sedan and then she entered the truck. Soon after, she drove off. After a while, she noticed the fresh bullet wounds, so she dug into her medical kit and treated herself. 10 minutes later, she ditched the truck and then entered a waiting Secret Service car. Chapter After much thinking, Kine decided to return to the General Assembly. Then he met with T'Challa and Ororo. "I suspect you had some doing in me still being alive," said Kine. "And I want to express my gratitude. It is nice that you still care despite our disagreements." "It's normal for us," said Ororo. Then, like a professional, Kine resumed his negotiations with T'Challa and Ororo. However, they could not reach an agreement, therefore, Kine was still going to vote against the policy. Yet by the end of the day, T'Challa and Ororo believed that the mutant policy would be accepted by the majority of the General Assembly. But they had no plans of celebrating until the final count was made. Thus the couple spent a sedated night at the Wakanda embassy. They curled up with each other on their bed and slept. The next day was the vote, and the couple still kept their composure as they sat at the Wakanda table. Then the results came. 150 voted yes, 29 voted no, and 11 abstained. Ororo smiled, and she punched her fists slightly up in the air, because of the victory. "We did it," said Ororo, and she whispered to T'Challa, "Shuri can go home now." "I'm already sending the news," he said as his right thumb typed on the Kimoyo screen. Elsewhere, Shuri received the information and then she emerged from her hiding spot. She had remained in the city to ensure nothing else occurred at the General Assembly. Within 30 minutes, she returned to the submarine and then she set a course for home.